Hey everybody, this is Vernier for CarRunners.com and welcome to episode number 2 of DJ Cokes is Robusto. Here we are at the tables. We have Queen 10 offsuit. It's small blind, big blind. Now, I definitely advocate staying very tight in the small blind, especially small blind and big blind, and especially with a player who's playing 56-11. So this player is playing very loosely. And he's playing quite aggressively. He's got an aggression factor of 5. So against a player like that, if we look at the kind of hands we want to be opening, kind of given Poker Stove, we definitely want to be playing all kinds of Broadway type hands. We want to play some of the stronger aces like Ace 8 suited, Ace 9 suited, a hand like Queen 9, King 9 suited, King 9 offsuit, and some of these pocket pairs. So these are the kind of hands that are going to play pretty well post flop versus this kind of a villain. Maybe even a hand like 10-9 suited, Jack 9 suited. So we want to be leaning towards playing hands that, more often than not, if they make a pair, they're going to have a pretty good kicker, and we're going to be able to win on just pair values. So I would stay away from opening all kinds of like goofy suited connectors and suited one gappers versus this kind of a player when we're going to be out of position for the rest of the hand. But Queen 10 suited is definitely in that range. And yeah, it's a hand that if we flop a 10, the Queen's going to be a pretty good kicker. And if we flop a Queen, the 10's going to be a pretty decent kicker. So I'd be looking to play the small blind, big blind, even against somebody who's playing as loosely and as aggressively as Malsamon. Now, having a player like that on our left is going to be a detriment. So let's just kind of see what happens as the video goes along. Now, just when I'm looking at these tables, the player on our left is going to be a very important person, as they're going to have position on us just about every time, 5 out of 6 times, and I can see just quickly glancing that on table 3 we've got Curry05 who's playing 20-20 right now, which are very reasonable numbers, but everybody else is on all the other tables. There definitely seem to be players that are playing very loose. So I would try to find it so that the player who's sitting directly on my left is not going to be as loose. All right, on table 4, I like just calling with King 10, especially with a short stack that limped. Sometimes, yeah, I think at this level, just calling here is going to be okay. Queens, we're definitely going to be raising. 30 cents in late position, kind of like what we talked about in the previous episode. By doing so, you're going to be able to open a little bit, we're going to be able to open a few more hands, which is going to be good for us. Now, we get flat called in 2 spots and get a flop 2-4-5. So on a flop like this, we figured that when somebody leads, especially somebody who's playing 50-10-3, they're going to be leading a wide range of hands here. So my read on this situation is that a lead out here is a draw with a marginal made hand, and more often than not, it's going to be probably like a combination draw. So maybe in this case a hand like Ace 5, Ace 4. It's never going to be the nuts. So it's never going to be a hand like Ace 3 or 3. Well, I say never, but hardly ever. A player that's leading really good hands on these kind of boards is usually the kind of nitty players, somebody who's playing like 10-10, they'll lead this with a set because they're afraid of all the draws. But a player who's playing 50-10, they're going to be leading this with draws more often than not, or marginal main hands. So, like I said, hands like ace-5, maybe a hand like 6-8, which has a gutter, which actually has a double gutter, so that would be a pretty good hand. But we almost always have the best hand here. So at this point, I would be raising this. And this is kind of something we talked about in the last video, which is when we think we have the best hand, when we almost always think we've got the best hand here, we should raise to charge for draws. So if somebody has ace-5 and they're betting this, they're not betting to fold. They're going to be betting to call. So we want to get a couple streets of value. So I would start by raising this to like 210. If he comes over the top, I'm definitely playing it for stacks. I just don't think that he's got a better hand. Now, on the turn, we still have the best hand. And now he leads 60 cents into $2. So he leads for less than pot. My read is no different, and I'm still convinced we have the best hand. So this time around, we do end up raising. I would raise more here. I would raise to something like 240. I think $1.50 is just a little bit too little. I think if we had a marginal made hand ourselves, something like ace-5, then I don't mind a smaller re-raise just to kind of get to showdown with like a reverse blocker bet or something like pocket sevens. But I think our hand is too strong here, and I think they're going to be on a draw more often than not. So I would just charge him. But the nice thing about if we had raised the flop is we could be able to just get more money on the turn. So the sooner we start building a pot, the more we're going to be able to put in relation to that pot on later streets. Now, obviously, a misconception of that, well, a misapplication of that by a lot of micro and low stakes players is they start building pots with really marginal hands when they know it's going to go bet, raise, call. But in this case, we just have the board, we have a really strong hand, so we do want to be building the pot. So they do call, and now on the river we have, well, we have the third nuts, but essentially we do have the nuts. So now, given the read of the whole situation, this person still has a marginal main hand. I would say they have a draw more often than not, so I would bet very little here. I would bet something like $2 and just have to get looked up. I think 350 is too much, and this is something that I mentioned in the last video where Jan has shown a propensity for playing passively the first two streets and then playing aggressively, or putting little money on the first two streets and then putting big money in on the river where a hand is essentially a lock. But I think it should be reversed. I think we should be putting more money in early streets where the person still has a chance to improve, and putting less money in on later streets when the person can't really improve anymore, and then their hand is not about the potential that it could have, but just on its face value. So I think the reasoning here is a little bit backwards. When we think somebody has a draw or marginal hand, we should be putting in more money in early and less money in late. Because, you know, if they had a draw, like even a hand like ace-6, well, on the river, they just don't have anything, and they're not going to be able to put any more money in. So, yeah, I think that's an important hand that I'm still not seeing quite the adjustment that I would like to see from the first video, where DJ Cokes would play passively for the first two streets and then try to play a little bit more aggressively later on, but at that point it didn't really make that much of a difference. So At this point, he mentions, I think there's too much to think about when I play four tables, and perhaps it's a little bit too ambitious. And as we will see later on, and this is something that I've seen my students do as well, is it doesn't seem like, or I should say, when you watch a video, and you watch a video on card runners that has four tables going, it seems very standard, but that's often there's often just too much going on, and something that I've had a lot of my students make four tabling videos, so it seems pretty standard for me to be watching four tables, but there's just so much to process that now over here we have I'm going to get back to my point in a second, but here we have pocket kings on an ace high flop. I think this is a spot where we should be betting just to make our life easier later on. Now there's 65 cents in the pot. We really don't need to bet a lot just because it's so dry of a flop. I would bet something like, I would actually bet 40 cents here. 45 cents is fine, and we see the player insta-folds. But going back to what I was saying, if you find that there's too many things going on when you're playing four tables, you just need to play fewer tables. And playing fewer tables is going to help you grow and develop as a player probably faster. So I know some mid and high stakes players who crush the game who have never played more than four tables at the same time. And sometimes they'll play fewer tables. And their reasoning is when they play high stakes, they just really need to focus. And by being able to play fewer tables, they're essentially learning how to play fewer tables effectively, and they're learning to... So, I mean, being able to consistently play something like 2 or 3 tables is in itself a skill. Now, here's a misapplication of something that I talked about in the first episode. So I said, raise 4 BBs from early position and 3 BBs from later position. Now, I didn't specify how to calculate limpers in there too, so yeah, when you're just trying to steal and the pot's been unopened, we can make it 3 BBs from early position. But when we're isolating limpers, then I would do 3 BBs plus 1 BB per limper, which is something that is definitely pretty standard and talked about on the forums. You can actually make it more, but in this case, I would actually overlimp the 5-6 suited. I don't think it's strong enough to be raising. I don't think it's a mistake to raise it, but it's a hand that I don't mind seeing a multi-way pot, so I would probably just limp it along here at the micros. Now, DJ makes it 30 cents, and this is something that is a misapplication of what I asked him to do. I wasn't specific enough, so this is something that we'll definitely correct before the next episode. So if you're going to raise it, I would make it 50 cents here, but in this case, I think this is one of those hands. 5-6 suited plays so well multi-way in position that I would just limp it, and I would have a 5-way pot instead of a 2-way pot. Now, this is a flop that he says when he checks it. When he checks, it's a bet because he usually doesn't have a hand. Well, I would say, yeah, when he checks, it's definitely a bet, but it's not a bet because he checks. It's a bet because it's a good board for us to bet, and because we showed pre-flop initiative. So we raised, and now it's an ace-high board, so more often than not, we're going to be able to bet and take it down. I think that, in addition to that, we have a draw to 6 different cards will give us the nuts. We have an open-ender, and there's a straight draw, so we're betting for a couple of reasons. A, we're betting because we showed pre-flop initiative. B, we're betting because it's an ace-high board, and more often than not, he's not going to have anything. C, we're also betting because we have a draw ourselves, 5-6, we have an open and a straight draw, and we want to build a pot for when we do hit. But by betting, we've got the highest chance of taking it down, and I like that bet size. So yeah, that's a hand that if you're going to raise, make it 50 cents pre-flop. And now, this hand Queen 10 versus this villain 63-19 and another villain 23-8. This is another one of those Broadway type hands that I think you should be raising in position because they're going to play pretty well post flop. Now let's do a quick seat selection check and see how our tables compare. So table 1, we've got a loose passive on our left. I misspoke. We actually have a loose aggressive player on our left, and that's not a very good thing. We have a player. We don't know too much about the player on our right, and the player 2 to our right, this Castelli guy, is playing 33-33, so he's playing pretty loose and pretty aggressively. And then we have a player directly across the table from us, DJ Star, who's playing 10-0, so he seems like definitely a tight player. We don't know if they're aggressive or passive, but DJ Star, that's a good player to have directly on our left. This Mouse Man is not a very good player to have on our left. And this Busfar09, he is on 2 of our tables, so he seems like a regular. Seems to be playing a little bit loose and but definitely aggressive. But he's not really a factor right now. So I wouldn't say that table 1 is really optimal. Table 2, we've got a good table but poor seat. We have a lot of very loose players on our left. We want these players on our right, and the players on our right seem to be reasonable. This Ignico guy is playing a little bit loose, but a VPIP of 28 is certainly reasonable at these stakes for having people at the table. I mean, when you compare that to a VPIP of 56, 44, and 40, this suddenly seems kind of taggish. And then you've got a player who's playing 11-11, this MacGyver guy, and as you can see, he's got the gold star, so it means he's playing a lot. So he is going to be tight. So this is a good player to have. This is a good player to have on our left. So I said seat number 1 would be ideal, but I actually think the ideal seat would be the seat number 6, where Luque Santa is. So that way we have MacGyver on our left, and then Ignico 2 to our left, and then all these guys would be on our right, which is where we want them. Alright, on table 3, Sia Flush is a reasonable player, and Curry seems like a reasonable player, and we know this Busfar09 guy he's a regular, so he's multi-tabling as well. So the only fish we have is a la Turca, who we don't have position on. So that's not very ideal. In table 4, Curly Man is a good player to have on our left, and then we've got these 3 players who are playing very loose, and all of them are on our left. So again, if the direction of the game was changed, if it didn't go clockwise but counterclockwise, this would be a very good table, as we would have position on all these fish. Unfortunately, they have position on us, so I don't think these seats are very good right now. And that's one of those things that, yeah, I definitely think you can make an effort to find more tables where you have players that are playing a little bit more tight. Well, start by making sure that there's at least one fish that you have position on. And when I look at these tables, that's really not the case. When I look at seats 1 and seats 2, up here, I wouldn't describe on table 1 as Castelli or Riskless Cash as fish, and I definitely wouldn't describe MacGyver or Nico as fish, and Sia Flush is not a fish, and Curly Man is not a fish, and Mr. Sando, I don't know enough about him, but none of these guys seem really fishy, whereas everybody on our left seems really fishy, except for this Busfar guy. Well, Curry doesn't seem fishy, but so I would say that that's Curry 05, he's in the right position on all 4 tables, but the rest of the tables, they're just not very good. Yeah. So that's my rant about seat selection. And I think if you're going to be playing less tables, then you can spend more time thinking about seat selection. And that's one of the things that should be pretty easy to start thinking about as, yeah, I mean, I would say after 10 or 15 hands, you should have a pretty good idea of what somebody's tendencies are. I mean, they don't start converging until much later on. I would say when you have 50 hands on somebody, you should have a pretty good idea of kind of the style that they're playing. But you should also have you should be able to get a general idea within a couple of orbits. Now, this is going to be an interesting hand, in that it's a limped pot. On the flop, we've got a gutter and a pair, but I would definitely not be looking to build a pot. So I would just be looking to check fold this, and this is something that DJ does as well. It's just too likely that somebody's going to call us, and yeah, I just don't think we have enough of a. We're not going to have often enough success in order to warrant betting their 4-way. Now, on the river, DJ is going to talk about the actual hand.
2 pair, and we might have the best hand. I'm going to bet the pot here to get maximum value. I think 40 cents is something that will get called. Okay, I even get raised. Interesting, I could just call or re-raise. I think he will go right along. I'm going to try it. I'm going to raise him up. See what he does. He calls me. And he takes it down. Okay, I didn't see that one coming. He got it straight. Not so smart, but that's I don't know how to actually play against. I think this is an illustration of an error that I make lots of times, and that is this guy has stats of 63, 26. In my eyes, it's someone who is capable of bluffing a lot, but perhaps I have a wrong way of thinking there.
So, I talked to DJ about this hand a little bit later on, and for one, I don't think that he noticed there's a 4-card straight out there. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. Obviously, that's a leak in somewhere, and the only question is, why is that a leak? I would say whenever you are raised on this kind of a board, so let's go back and let's look at the kind of a board that we had. Whenever you're raised on this kind of a board, definitely think about what kind of a hand the person could have. Now, when we listen to DJ's explanation, I think he's only concerned about his own hand here. He's only looking at the fact that he's got 8-10, but he should be thinking, what kind of hands is he raising on the river? Now, first you got to look at if there's any flushes. Well, there's no flushes. There's no full houses available, so now let's look at straights. Are there any straights possible? Well, I mean, King Jack is the nuts, and then any kind of a jack gives us a straight. So right off the bat, you should be thinking about that, and you should really stop and think about what exactly could this person have. And well, if it's not a straight, then could he have a 2-pair type hand like 10-9 or Queen 10. The only two-pair hand that we're ahead of is 8-9. And the question is, if we re-raise, is he really going to be calling 8-9? So you got to think about all these things. And I think if we would have spent a little bit more time looking at the board texture, well, we would have figured out for sure that his most likely holding there is a jack. So I would just, first of all, I don't think I would bet the river. But if you bet, I think you gotta bet with the intention of folding to any kind of a raise. And I think bet calling there is a pretty big mistake. But I think the biggest mistake is not having a not just taking a couple of seconds to really analyze the board and try to figure out what this person has have, and not really looking at the fact that, well, the player's playing 61-28, not focused on that as much as just being focused on, well, what could he have here? And yeah, so that's the mistake with that. All right, so let's move on. So yeah, so I think having a methodical approach of, first of all, on a board like that, looking at, well, what is the nuts on this board? And the nuts is obviously King Jack. It's the highest straight. And then trying to figure out, well, how likely is it that the person has the nuts? And then saying, well, what's the second nuts? And what's the third nuts? And how would the player play the third nuts? How would they play the second nuts? Etc., etc., etc. So, alright, up on table 2, we raise, and with somebody who's playing 61-22, ace, 7, king, it's just such a dry board. We are definitely looking to bet it, as I think we're going to get called. This kind of a player who's playing 61-22-1 is not going to be folding any kind of a pair. I would bet small here. I would bet like 45 or 50 cents. I think 40's actually perfect because we have this board so crushed, we want them to be calling with a pretty wide range. Queen 9, I would say, definitely a good hand to be raising on the button. If we, especially, I mean, we're playing 4-4, but a hand like Queen 9, I would definitely be raising that. It plays pretty well for high card value, especially in position, and especially with two players that are playing fairly reasonably in the blinds. Actually, I would be raising Queen 9 on the button against just about everybody, unless I have somebody who's just 3-betting relentlessly. Now on table 4, we pick up 9-10 suited, and that's a hand that I want to spend a little bit more time analyzing, and in fact, it's a situation that I want to spend a little bit more time analyzing. And on table 3, we pick up pocket 9s. We've got a player who's playing 24-14, who raises an early position. So I definitely like calling here. So I guess a big reason why I also like calling here is it gives a chance for a la Turca to come along, and I'm going to be able to play a multi-way pot with 9s in position. And while the flop is likely to contain overcards, I think it's still an optimal play against somebody who's raising from early position, and 9s are just going to play well in position. So down here we call 9-10 suited, and I want to talk about the merits of calling a hand like that, but I will do that in a second. So in fact, we do get 3-way, and up here I'll come back to how to play these 9s post flop in a 4-way pot, but up here Mr. Sando leads out against us. So yeah, I want to talk about, oops, I jumped. Basically, Mr. Sando leads out against us, and I want to talk about the situation in a little bit more depth. Okay, so whenever we have a plan, whenever we have a hand, we should always be considering all our options. Now, I saw that DJ just, I guess, saw his hand and saw that it's suited connector. He's got position, so by default he's going to be calling. But I think you need to stop for a second and just really analyze the whole situation. So first of all, look at our hand. I guess looking at our hand is important. So a hand 9-10 suited, it's a reasonable hand. Now, the next thing, of course, if you had something like 9-10 offsuit, you can probably fold that. I mean, there's some situations where we make a play, but I guess here that's just thinking about it too hard. Let's just assume that we're full tabling, we look down, and we like our hand. So the second thing is to look at the villain. Now, on my analysis section on the right, I said how well defined is the villain's range preflop. So the player's playing 20-20 fairly aggressively, which makes me think he's kind of a card runner's 2+2 type. And he made it 35 cents, so he potted it. So right there it tells me that he's also going to be a thinking player, because on stars it's not easy to pot it, so he either has a script which pots it. It basically just seems like a regular good thinking player. So versus his range, he's raising an early position, and he's got players that are short stacks in the blinds. I would say his range is there weighted towards strength. Now, how does our hand play versus that range post flop? And 9-10 suited actually plays fairly well versus that range. So if we look at a standard player who's playing 20% of his hands, they're probably going to be raising all these type hands. He's definitely going to be raising any kind of pocket pair from early position, and probably hands maybe like a Jack 10 suited as well, Ace Queen, high aces, and any kind of pocket pair. I would say maybe some other suited connectors are going to be in there as well. So that's the kind of range he's going to be opening from early position. And when we look at, oops, let me bring that back. When we look at how 9-10 suited fares versus that range, let me bring 9-10 suited specifically, 9-10 of spades. How does that fare versus that range? We can see we've got about 41% equity, which is pretty good. So now, the second thing to consider is how likely is it that the pot's going to be multi-way. So a hand like 9-10 suited is going to play pretty well multi-way in position, but that would be even better if these guys had some pretty deep stacks. Unfortunately, this guy, Do Hive, this person is sitting on 74 BBs, which isn't deep, but it's not a short stack that's probably going to be shoving over us. So it's unlikely that we're going to get squeezed out of the pot, and it's kind of likely that we are going to get, we probably are going to see a multi-way pot in position. So now let's consider all our options. So we have to look at, before I look at this, consider all the options, we got to look at this Mr. Sando guy first and think about it, and then think about how likely is it that we're going to have a multi-way pot. I would say it's pretty likely that we're going to have a multi-way pot. And how is our hand going to do in a multi-way pot? And I think our hand's going to do okay in a multi-way pot. We're unlikely to get squeezed out of it pre-flop. But let's consider all our options. So why 3-bet? Well, the reasons for 3-betting are we are most likely to, these guys seem to be fairly passive in the blinds, so it's unlikely that they're going to be reshoving against us. And they have just big enough stacks to where they're probably not going to be reshoving any too. And if we 3-bet now, then our hand's going to be really easy to play. And in addition to that, this Mr. Sando guy seems like the kind of player that is going to give our 3-bet respect, because we said he's kind of the card runners type, and we're playing 16-5, so he's going to give our 3-bet just the utmost respect. Now, why fold? Well, 9-10 suited is well, I guess I can't really think of any good reasons to fold. He is opening from early position, so his range is skewed towards strength. If he was raising from maybe like the cutoff when we're on the button, then his range is much wider. But because he's raising from early position, it's just skewed towards a more defined range. So I can't really think of good reasons to fold this hand. The guys in the blinds, the people in the blinds certainly don't look like they're going to be squeezing a lot. So why call? Well, calling, we will see a pot multi-way, and if we call now, again, we're probably unlikely to get we're probably not likely to get squeezed here. So calling is an option too. I would say, given all these things, I would say, because it's likely to be multi-way and because we are likely to be in position, I would say calling is the best option. But I certainly have to consider all 3 options. Now, what's our plan post-flop? If we go heads up and we hit any kind of a piece, any kind of a low board, we're probably going to be either raising or floating. If we hit, obviously, any pair, then we're also going to be probably just, calling the flop and kind of proceeding the caution. If the flop is multi-way, we're going to play our hand for face value. Even if we hit a pair, and this Mr. Sando, well, if we hit a pair and there's overcards on the flop and he leads into 2 people, he's probably not going to be leading with air, so we're going to let it go. But if we hit a pair and somebody else calls and it goes check check, we're probably going to be betting. So that's our general plan pre-flop and post-flop. We look at all options. I think 3-betting is okay, but these guys are just not deep enough to where I trust them to be folding to a 3-bet. And yeah, I like a call given all our options. And the plan is, if we hit any kind of a flop and it's heads up, we're gonna be floating this guy because we think that this guy's gonna be a person we can't float. If we actually hit a pair, we're just gonna be looking to shove it down. So because we think that this guy's going to be c-betting a lot. So that's kind of the analysis of the hand and the analysis of the situation. So let's actually talk about what happened in this. So, given our read of this whole situation, now on table 4, when we actually hit a pair of 9s, we hit a mid-pair, this kind of a player is going to be continuation betting this board. I would say 100% of the time. It's a king high board. It's a good board for him to continuation bet. Now, while we expect him to continuation bet this 100% of the time, I don't think this is a situation where we're going to get double barreled. So I think it's a mandatory call on the flop. We might have the best hand, since a lot of low pocket pairs and like ace queen, ace jack type hands are going to be continuation betting this. We just have way too much equity to be folding this. So if we're going to be calling pre-flop with a hand like 9-10 suited, it's certainly not to fold when we hit a piece of this flop. If he bets again on the turn and we don't hit a 9 or if we don't hit another 9 or a 10, we're probably just going to fold. If he bets again, but on here, it's just a mandatory call. I think calling pre-flop with the intention of folding this kind of a flop is just too weak. Now, yeah, so on this flop, I'm calling this 100% of the time against this player. Now, on table 3, we called pre-flop with the 9s, and this Altrulaka 74 leads for 30 cents into $1.50. So he leads for like a fifth pot or something. And I think this is a mandatory raise for value. He could be doing this with just so many different kinds of hands. We just have to raise for value here. And on table 4, I would say something like $1.30 is fine. I might make it. Yeah, I think $1.30 is the perfect amount. So up here, we've got King Queen and we have a limper. I'd be raising this to something like 45 cents probably. Between 40 and 50 cents is fine. Between and including 40 and 50 cents. So if we look at the range of hands that we're actually going to be raising here to isolate. So early position limper, I would be isolating with not any Broadway, but I would say if we look at this range, I would add Ace-9 suited. I think a lot of it has to do with who's behind, but these hands are going to play pretty well, like 8s and up as far as pocket pairs, any kind of, I would say Ace-10 offsuit and above. Maybe we can take out Queen-10 offsuit out of this, but King-10 offsuit is going to play pretty well too. Queen-10 suited is going to play well. Basically, it should lean towards your high Broadways. I would say even Ace-9 suited is going to be good enough to isolate there, and then 8s and up. But King-Queen offsuit, I think it's a mandatory isolation here. So I might maybe even pocket 7s. You can certainly do that. I would say 6s and below I would limp behind. A lot of other stuff I would just fold. But Queen-10 suited, definitely in isolation there. Yeah, and then here, I don't think he's even going to be folding ace high. Definitely not folding a 3. Definitely not folding any kind of a pair. So we're just going to go for 3 streets of value with our pocket 9s. If the turn, if he checks the turn and we raise, then I would probably be folding. Now, Jack Queen suited. This is gonna end up being a pretty interesting hand, and both in how we play pre-flop and post-flop. But I would say with this loose button, Queen Jack is just a little bit too. I know Broadway cards play well versus these kind of players, but I would say that's just a little bit too loose. It's just a little bit too weak. So let's look at what kind of range I would be raising in early position, knowing that we have this player on the button. So I would definitely be raising any kind of pocket pair. Just because the stacks dictate that if I hit, I'm going to be able to take a stack. And I'm also going to be raising my high Broadways, as high cards are going to play well. I would say King Jack suited is going to be there too. Ace 10 suited is going to be okay. Ace 9 offsuit is just a little bit too marginal. Queen Jack suited, that's kind of close, and Queen 10 suited, that's kind of close too. But I actually don't even mind. Well, yeah, I like opening all these pocket pairs. So my initial thought was fold the pocket pairs, but I think the stacks dictate that if we do hit, we're going to go for a couple streets of value. Obviously, queens we're going to be playing as well. So, yeah, ace 10 suited. It's just I think it's okay. We can raise that. King Jack offsuit, we can. I think with this guy on the button, we can be raising that because if we hit a king or a jack, we're going to be playing it like it's the nuts. But I think Queen Jack offsuit is just a little bit too weak. Queen Jack suited, close, but just a little bit too weak. But that's the range I'll be doing this with. So let's continue. But we do end up opening, and we're gonna open to hopefully 40 cents since it's early position. But like I said, it's just a little bit too weak pre-flop. Now, The interesting thing happens that he re-raises us to 70 cents, so essentially min-raises us. Now, this means we're going to be out of position in two or three way. So everybody's got reasonable stacks. I actually like a fold here because Queen Jack offsuit is going to be, it's just going to be dominated. So the hands that he's 3-betting us with, while it's a hand that plays well versus the hands he's playing, because he's playing 68% of hands, it's a hand that's not going to play well post-flop in a re-raised pot. So if you notice the chat, he also says, I will leave soon. So that's, I'm not sure what that means. But as I'm saying here, calling re-raises with dominated hands, hands like Queen Jack suited, King 10 suited, King 9 suited, out of position is going to be a major league. So now, what kind of hands? Let's look at, given the action. If I had jacks, queens, kings, or aces, I would probably be 4-betting those. Same with ace king suited and ace king offsuit. These are the hands I'd be 4-betting and looking to get it all in. Now, with hands like ace queen suited and ace queen offsuit, I think those are going to be, they're just a little bit too strong to fold. And king queen suited, while those hands also have maybe king queen, it's just king queen suited is that's just going to be a tough one to play. So I actually don't mind folding king queen suited as well. But I would say ace queen offsuit and ace queen suited are going to be hands that I think are too weak to just fold. They're only going to be dominated by ace king, and I think versus this villain, it's just too weak to fold right now, given what we know. But I would be calling with like 10s and lower. As far as pocket pairs are concerned, probably folding anything else. I think any kind of suited connector to be calling there is just a little bit too ambitious, and I'd be looking to fold it. But interestingly enough, we flop the nuts. So when we flop the nuts, I would check this 100% of the time because I would expect this player to bet it 100% of the time. So this is a great board for him to bet. But DJ, let's see what he ends up doing. So he does end up checking, which is good. And like I said, I would check this 100% of the time. Now, Alatruca thinks and bets 95 cents. And I think at this point, I would actually min raise. And the reason I would do that is it's just going to be tough to play the hand out of position. But because he is so loose, I don't know how much he bluffs. I haven't actually seen him do a straight up bluff, but I don't think he'll fold anything to a min raise, other than like pocket nines. I don't hate a call just because he's so loose, but I would just rather try to take charge of the hand right now, and I would min raise him. And honestly, I just don't expect him to fold anything to a min raise. The turn pairs the board, which isn't great for us, but it's not bad either. It puts the flush out there too. I don't mind a donk bet here. Something like, so he's thinking about it, DJ's thinking about it, 280. I think 280 would be good. I really don't like checking here. I think checking, the board is starting to get a little bit too draw heavy. I would rather just lead out. If he has something like pocket eights, if he has air, obviously we're going to lose value, but that's the problem with calling hands like Queen Jack offsuit preflop is, you know, even if we flop the nuts, we're not necessarily going to get paid off. So I I think on the turn I like a lead. I would lead something like 250 to just try to get value. I just don't trust the guy to be betting. Up on table 2, standard raise with pocket sevens. So he thinks for a while and he bets 250. And I just think you have to raise here. You got to raise at some point. But the problem with um, check call, uh, you know, check calling the flop is if you raise here, your hand just looks like such a monster. That's why I like check raising either the flop or leading the turn. Because I think you could lead with just too many goofy things. And then if you checked twice, then if you did end up checking twice, then I think you need to check the river. I think he's gonna be, if he bluffed twice, I think he might be apt to bluff again. But DJ decides to just go all in here. Obviously, if he has an ace, he's not going to fold an ace. But I think if he has any kind of a bluff, he's going to fold the bluff. So if you slow play this long, go ahead and check the river again. But I definitely like a min raise or in the flop, and maybe like a donk lead on the turn. But like I said, that's kind of the problem. So he ends up thinking for a second, and he thinks, and ends up folding. Up here, it's 20 more cents. We get min raised by the button. With pocket sevens in position, it's just a mandatory call. Kind of looking to set mine and not get too involved. But the way the hand played out on table 3 just really illustrates why calling with queen jack offsuit, even to a min raise, it's just not going to be profitable when you're out of position. Because we flopped the nuts, especially against a player who's playing 68-23. We flopped the nuts, and so what? We still didn't get paid off, and we just didn't really know what to do on any given street. So I think folding that pre-flop, even for such a low price, was going to be the correct play. On table 2, we flopped second pair, and the player, there's $1 in the pot, and he bets 40 cents, which is 2/5 pot. We have no idea what that means. We know he's very aggressive, but we're definitely just going to peel once. I think folding on this flop is just too weak, because he's going to be betting this with just a really wide range. Now the turn brings a 9, so it gives us a straight draw. In fact, it gives us a straight flush draw, because the 8 of diamonds gives us the nuts. But we have a flush draw, which we don't know if it's good, because he could have, his re-raising range includes a lot of high hearts. So I would not count our flush draw as good. And he just ends up going all in. So at this point, we're risking 830 to win something like $1.80. And I think unless we have a huge read on this player, and we read him as just really spewy or really donkish, I think the risk and reward is it's just too, we just don't know. So unless we have a better read, I think it's just a fold on the turn. And DJ says, I have to fold it. It's too much of a gamble. I agree. While his shove here, you could say, well, he might be doing this with ace king, with like the ace of hearts, just trying to throw you off the hand. But sometimes it's something like queens with a heart that's just now trying to protect it, or like queens without a heart, or jacks or something like that. But I just don't know enough, and I got a good price pre-flop, and I got a good price on the flop, and now I just think it's too much of a gamble. So, why risk 83 big blinds without much of a read? Yeah, you could be ahead, but you just don't know. I think it's too risky. Sorry. Those are just my notes on the video, so I'm moving them. All right, pocket sevens in early position. I would raise this to, I think 40 cents is here. 40 cents is fine. I would probably make it 45 cents, given that this guy posted out of position. If I'm making it 45 cents and he goes all in after posting out of position, I'm going to be calling with my sevens because he's a short stack and he could have any two cards to be doing that. A lot of people like to just post out of position and then shovel in with any kind of marginal hand, just because you're raising them and they want to get in the action right off the bat. This is the good flop to be betting. I think people are going to play this very straightforwardly against you. So I would bet something like 70 cents on this flop. It's so dry, and I want to bet a little bit less because I just don't think people are going to be making moves on this without an ace. Or something stronger. I would say, an ace or stronger. And if I get called, then I'm not looking to proceed with the hand. So 80 cents is fine. Once he min raises on this flop, somebody who has an aggression factor of 1, it's just an insta fold. It's one of those situations where you should be taking this down on the flop so often, and we just never expect to get bluff raised by something like King Queen here. So if he did end up bluffing us, more power to him. It's just a horrendous spot for him to bluff, and a great spot for us to continuation bet and try to take it down. We're betting 3 ways too, so we might have more respect. And I think somebody who's playing 65-29 with an aggression factor of 1.2 is just going to be playing their hands so often. So now we've got a couple of short stacks. We've got somebody who's sitting on $5 and somebody who's sitting on 350, and then we have a nit, and we've got somebody who's playing 65, 23 on our left. So yeah, good job on replacing that table, as it's not going to be a very good table for us. Oh my goodness! But now we've got. Oh, okay. This guy had a Doyle Brunson avatar, and he's sitting on $5.65, which is kind of ironic, as I don't think Doyle Brunson is going to be short stacking 10 no limit games. My favorite is when I'm playing like 10 no limit or 25 no limit, and a bunch of people have Phil Ivey avatars, as I guess this Busfar guy has. Actually, maybe like I think more so than Phil Ivey, the Sam Farha avatar is a lot of fun. I guess because a lot of players at these stakes really look up to Sam Farha as a model of aggressive and tough play, and they see him cold calling 3-bets with hands like 9-2 suited and trying to quote unquote outplay people post flop. So we've got a couple of hands going on here. Now up here, I guess on table 2 we have Ace-Jack offsuit versus a player who's sitting on a short stack. I would be calling this. I think it's just too strong versus a random min raise from the button. And I'm going to be looking to open this Jack-10 offsuit if it comes folded around to me. It's Broadway cards. I think they're going to play okay, especially in position. But when it's open, yeah, definitely an easy fold. I think the fold of the Ace-Jack here was a little bit too weak. Checking King-10 is absolutely fine. We're going to be leading a wide variety of flops. The DJ decides to lead this flop, which I really like. I would lead this for 20 cents. We've got a gutter, backdoor, spades, and it's such a dry flop that if he has an ace, he's going to continue, obviously. If we hit our gutter, we are going to be able to stack him, but I think If he has anything other than an ace, he's going to be folding. If he has a queen, he might call ones, but more often than not, he's just not going to have anything. Ace-6 suited is going to be a fold on table 3. But we do bet and we do take it down, and I like that play. We've got a couple pocket pairs coming up here. Pocket 9s. Binary Raya is playing 4-0, 0.5. Pocket 3s on table 4. I like an open versus a reasonable player. I would probably just make it 30 cents. DJ makes it 40 cents, but right. So my note here versus a 400.5. I think this is a great spot to be set mining. I think in the last video we talked about pocket 6's hand where somebody opened from the button. It's a very different situation because this guy's playing so few hands, his range is going to be very well defined. Somebody who's playing, so he's playing 4% of hands. If we look at Poker Stove, and we look at 4% of hands, 4% of hands is 9s and up, Ace-King, and Ace-Queen suited. So this is a very well defined range. Against a player like that, pocket 9s are going to be really easy to play because we either flop a set and stack him if he hits, because more often than not he's going to have an overpair, or if he has ace-king, basically we just have great odds to stack a player like that because his range is going to be so well defined. And we're a little bit deeper too, so everything here says call. Now this Curry 05 guy, he's playing 16-13, so he's probably not going to be squeezing us. And I think it would be silly for him to be squeezing against somebody who's playing 4-0, but I think it's a mandatory call. Versus somebody who's playing looser. Now, obviously, pretty much everybody, this is probably as tight of a player as we're going to see, but versus somebody who's playing like 20% or more of their hands, I'd be 3-betting this I would often be 3-betting this. Versus somebody who's playing 13% or less, I would be calling. Somebody who's playing between 14 and 20%, I would alternate between. I would just have to look at some other statistics. I would have to look at how often they're stealing. You could have somebody who's playing 14% and stealing a lot, and somebody who's playing 14% and not stealing that much. So I would base my decision to 3-bet or call based on that. I'm probably never folding 9s given that action. It's just a matter of whether I'm calling or 3-betting. I think players who are playing very loose, I'm going to be 3-betting. Players who are playing a little bit tighter, I'm going to be flat calling. We have two ace-king hands. The one on the left is going to be pretty interesting. Obviously, we're going to be opening both of those hands. And they're both actually kind of interesting. So here we have the board absolutely crushed. We don't know anything about this player. I would probably be betting this. I'd bet something like 40 cents. But I don't mind a check just because we're probably so far ahead. And if the player picks up like a flush draw or some kind of a straight draw or some kind of a pair, then he might be more apt to call a bet. There's just such a narrow range of hands that this villain on table 4 could be calling our flop bet with, that this is one of those rare instances where I don't mind a check. Now, if we miss, of course, we're betting this all the time. So this is one of those situations where our play is very exploitable, but probably optimal as this NYYY 1927. We're probably not going to see him much, and we're probably not going to have any metagame against him. back to table 3, where we get re-raised by a 14-14 type player. Now, what does that mean? Alright, table 4, now we gotta bet. 30 cents is fine, 40 cents is fine too. So, once again, we want to examine all our options. So, we can call. We're going to go from most passive to most aggressive. Calling being the most passive and 4-betting being the most aggressive. Now notice I said our option is to 4-bet and call, because I think 4-bet folding is horrendous. Basically, if you 4-bet, 4-bet folding is the equivalent of raising for information, and I think anytime you're raising for information, it's a huge leak. So calling, let's look at why we could potentially call. Well, if we're calling, it's because this guy's playing 14-14, so he's playing fairly tight, and we have position post flop, so more often than not at the micros, if you end up 4-betting, if you end up getting shoved on pre-flop, then you're not that good of a shape. So basically, because we have position, there's merits to calling, and because we just don't know enough about this guy and he seems reasonable, there's just no problem in calling pre-flop. I think folding is a little bit too weak. So while I could think about folding and examine it, I think even against a player like this, it's just too weak. If he was playing something like 10-0, then you could consider folding, or if maybe like this guy raises an early position and then Binary Riot re-raises him, well, now I can maybe fold my ace king, but versus just somebody who's playing 14-14, folding is not doesn't have that much merit. Now, what about 4-betting? Why 4-bet? Well, a hand like ace king is going to actually only hit an ace or a king 32% of the time. So on the flop, so more often than not, he's going to bet, and we're going to have to fold unless we had an ace or king. So basically, we're hoping to hit an ace or a king. And even if we do, we're probably not going to get that much action. Because if he has queens and jacks, and he's not gonna pay us off when we actually hit our ace or a king. In addition to that, this guy's playing 14-14. So while he's playing tight, he's also raising every hand that he's involved in, raising or re-raising, and he's 3-bet 33% of the time. So I actually like a 4-bet. I think it's gonna make. Actually, never mind. I actually think I would have called in this situation, just because I don't know enough about the player. But I think 4-betting is perfectly fine. I like the bet size of 210. Any snap folds. But just because I'm not sure what I would have done if he shoved, I hate 4-betting and then folding. So I think given all that, I think I like my call. I think I like a call pre-flop. And yeah, you're more often than not, you're not going to hit, but until I know more, I would just take a more passive route. Versus this specific player, versus the majority of players at this limit, I'm probably 4-betting. Alright. On table 4, we get a really interesting hand, which we're going to build on a lot of these issues that we talked about, which is being led into on the flop when we have a hand which is not the nuts. So the pot is $1.20, and Curly Man leads for 40 cents. So Curly Man leads for 1/3 of the pot. We still have somebody who's to act behind us, and we have jacks, which is an underpair to the board. So let's examine the situation, figure out what we need to do here. So here we are. One of the themes that's come out of the first two videos is how often people will donk bet into us. Now, it seems like the majority of times somebody has donk bet into us, we've actually had legitimate hands. So that's the nice thing about playing tight at the micros is more often than not, you're actually going to have a hand. And the only question is, how do we play our hand? So let's look at the situation. We've got somebody who's playing 29-13, leading for 1/3 pot into us. We still have somebody who, well, we don't know anything about him other than the fact that they're sitting on a normal stack, and they've only played 2 hands, but they do have position on everybody involved. So I would start with the analysis, and I would start with how draw heavy this board. So there's a flush draw out there, and there's some straight draws. It's not too connected aside from the flush draw, and it has a high card. Now, what's the villain's range here? I would say I just have no idea. He could certainly have a king. He could have a 6. He could have a 3. He could have a flush draw. Usually, donk bets like this, they don't. They're usually not strong. It's usually a marginal made hand. I would say it could be something like 6-7. It could be a hand like Ace-6. It could be 6-8. Yeah, there's some kings there too. Obviously, draws 4-5. Maybe something even like 2-5, 4-7, some gutters. Basically, it's a weak bet. It's a blocker bet that they just want to see the turn for cheap. So that's kind of the villain's range here. How likely are we to have the best hand? It's very likely that we have the best hand. There's only 3 more kings in the deck, and so it's his range is heavily skewed towards a non-king. Do we need to protect it? So if we call, then it's very likely that NYY is going to call too. And then we're going to be out of position, and we just have no clear understanding of where we're going to be in the hand if we flat call here. So yeah, it's draw heavy. We also don't want, if NYI is sitting on something like Ace-3 or just something goofy, by calling we give him odds to call, and it's just going to be too tough to play. So we don't want it to be multi-way, and it's draw heavy enough to where I would say, yeah, we have to protect our hand. Are we likely to have the best hand? Yes. Do we need to protect it? Yes. Now, what's our plan for different terms? If it comes a diamond, we don't have a diamond ourselves. It's likely that he's on a flush draw. If another overcard comes, I would say a queen or an ace. A queen is a good card for us because it's unlikely that he has a queen unless he specifically has king-queen, which we're crushed by anyhow. So if another overcard comes, an ace is not a very good card because people just like to donk lead aces. So if I would say if a diamond comes, we're going to check behind. If another overcard comes, we're probably if an ace comes, we're probably going to be checking behind. If a queen comes, we're going to be betting again, and if a blank comes, we're probably going to be betting again. I actually don't even mind a small bet if a diamond comes, just as a reverse blocker, but everything else we're probably going to be betting. So, let me think. Yeah, with a diamond, I actually don't mind checking behind with a diamond, because we don't have a diamond ourselves, and he most likely is going to pick up. It's much more likely that he's going to have a diamond in his hand, and it's just not going to fold the turn if we bet again, and then we're inflating the pot with kind of a marginal hand at that point. So with a diamond, I just check behind. If an ace, I probably check behind too. Anything else, I'm going to fire. So, but I'm definitely raising this. I'm raising this to something like $1.20. And if I get any more action, so if NYY comes along, I'm just hating life. More often than not, Curly Man is gonna call here. We're gonna bet the turn, and he's gonna fold. So that's the plan for this hand. So DJ in fact doesn't raise. He makes it $1.40, which I think is a good amount. I think $1.20, $1.30, $1.40. They're all good. He does call, and the turn is a great card. It's essentially a blank, and now I think we need to blocker bet. Well, it's a reverse blocker bet. Now a reverse blocker bet is a bet on the turn which gets value from draws and allows us to check down the river. So I would bet something like $2.10. I would bet about half the pot here. So no reason to bet a lot, because if he shoves on us here, then we're just going to be folding because we showed too much strength. I think 280s might be a little bit too much. I don't mind it. I would probably bet a little bit less myself. But actually, I probably like 250s fine. So we get a pretty interesting hand up on table 2, where we raise 30 cents from the button. We should raise 30 cents from the button. There we go. Moving the window and raising 30 cents. Now, we get min raised, and that's kind of another benefit of raising to something like 30 cents, is now the min raise, it's only 20 more cents to us, whereas I think if we bet 40 cents, it just gives us, in this kind of a situation, it makes it a lot easier for us to play this in position. So now the question is, should we play this in position? And let's look at how, let's say, well, we have 9 of clubs, 10 of clubs. If you're not using Poker Stove to be thinking about your game, you definitely need to download it. It's free software, and anybody who's playing the game seriously really needs to be examining their play using Poker Stove and just start thinking about the game mathematically too. So what kind of range are we being re-raised by? Obviously, Jackson hires 10s for sure, although it's much less likely as we have one of the 10s, so there's only he can only have half the 10s. Probably King Queen suited, Ace Queen suited, Ace Jack suited, Ace Queen offsuit, King Queen offsuit probably, Ace Jack offsuit. I would say those are the kind of hands we're going to be re-raised by. Maybe King Jack suited, probably not King Jack. Well, let's even say King Jack offsuit, but that's probably the kind of hands we're going to be getting 3-bet by. It's kind of a loose range, but let's apply that. And against this range, we have 35% equity, which is surprisingly high. Now, it's only 20 more cents to play, and even though he's a short stack, he's not entirely a short stack, so it's 20 more cents to play whatever he has left behind, and we have 34% equity, and yeah, I think we definitely have the odds to call here. And like I said, another benefit of raising small in late position is that we'll have these odds to play these kind of hands. Now, if we had a hand like Queen Jack, this is a hand that's very different from the earlier situation when on table 3 we had the Queen Jack. First of all, it's a villain that's raising a lot fewer hands. Second of all, we have position, and third of all, we have a hand that's not as easily dominated. So let's look at how a hand like Queen of Clubs, Jack of Hearts fares versus this range. So as you can see, the equity drops down more than 7 percentage points. So versus a range that we define here, a hand like 9 of clubs, 10 of clubs, just plays that much better. More than 7 percentage points better. And we have position, and it's only versus one player. So, all these things say call here and fold down on table 2, or table 3 earlier. And it's important to understand how these two situations are fundamentally different. Yeah, so DJ is analyzing all these things here, and he's saying, well, he's 29, he doesn't raise. This guy's pretty passive too. He's only raising 1%, or his aggression factor is only 1, so that's pretty passive. All right, Gin flop for us. He's got 575. This is a flop that we're definitely going to be raising. He bets 80 cents. I would make this something committing, like probably more than 250. If I make it 250, he can still shove. 210 is fine. I mean, he can certainly shove. We're going to be going with any turn. He calls. Not a very good turn for us, but it does put out 3 to a flush out there. I think he's going to be shoving this with any kind of a. He's going to be shoving this with, or he's going to be betting this with any kind of a spade. He's probably going to be shoving this with any kind of a spade too. So at this point, we're just all in. If he has a jack, he has a jack. More often than not, he's not going to have it. Obviously, the worst card in the deck comes for us, the jack of spades. So now we don't beat anything other than aces or kings, unless he has a spade too. So he had queens. I think we played the hand perfectly. I don't think there's any other way to play the hand. It's just a bad beat on the turn. I think pre-flop we played it well. On the flop we played it well too. Yeah, there's just not much more to say about that. But that's kind of the last hand of the session. So now I'm going to talk about some of the suggestions for what to do for the next episode. Okay, so let me summarize what I liked and what I would like for DJ to work on. So what I really like is he's starting to play his draws a little bit more aggressively. Now, to add to that, one of the things to work on is focus on putting more money in on early streets versus weakness and donks. So raise the flop, block or bet the turn, instead of call the flop and then raise the turn. So work on that. You also started changing tables, which is good, but you should really focus on seat selection. The tables there, well, the tables were okay, but I just didn't think you had very good seats. So just really focus on that. Another thing to work on is play 3 tables for next time. You yourself said that 4 tables was a little bit too much, and I do think that for most microstakes players are able to play 4 tables, but usually they're swamped and there's just too many things going on, and I think they would really benefit and grow as players if they played 3 tables or less. So you realize that 4 tables might be too much. I think your bet sizing was very good, except for that goofy situation where you had limpers and you thought that I said, always raise 30 cents from late position. That's not really the case. So when you have limpers, make that adjustment. But overall, I'm very happy with your bet sizing. And finally, open up your stealing range, especially from the button. I saw you folding hands like Queen 9 suited, which I think are mandatory opens. So here's a range of hands that you should definitely be opening up from the button. Any kind of suited aces, just a lot of these high connected cards. Yeah, this is a range that you should definitely be opening up from the button. A lot of these you should be opening up from the cutoff too, but maybe a hand like Ace-7 offsuit. Well, definitely open these up from the button because you're just guaranteed to have position. All right, so For card runners, this is Vernier, and I'll see you guys next time.